Okay, well, kia ora. Welcome back to Cultivate Conversations. And tonight for me, but in the morning for Aaron Gate, multiple Olympian, fresh off Tokyo a few months ago, living in Europe. Kia ora. Gatey, how are you?
G'day, yeah, good. Yourself?
Yeah, great, actually. It's so nice to see you. Where are you in the world, first of all?
We're in Girona in Spain, which is about an hour north of Barcelona, sort of halfway between Barcelona and the French border, just inland from the coast. So it's winter here, but winter here is pretty mild, so it's not too bad.
And what are you doing there in Spain?
Well, this is sort of lots of sort of cyclists from all parts of the world. Actually, there's a lot of expats that live in this part, and it's sort of my base while I'm racing in Europe with the Black Spoke cycling team. It's the training here is good, and it's easy to get to all the racing we do. So we sort of headed straight here. I headed straight here from Tokyo, and my wife Kirsty and son Axel came over and met me here afterwards. So yeah, this is sort of home for us, home away from Kiwiland.
How's your Spanish?
Not great. Kirsty's, well, the really difficult thing here is their first language is actually Catalan. So it's kind of like a cross between Spanish and French in a way, but they've got all their own words. So I find myself just talking a really weird hybrid mix of Spanish, Catalan and Kiwi words. Like, it's amazing though, the word for please, see us plough, if they see you're a foreigner and you say that, it goes a long way. So that's sort of the one that I keep on hand.
Brilliant. It's good to have a few tricks up in your book, up your sleeve. Sorry, living away from home. But hey, let's take a trip back. You know, Tokyo was your third Olympics, a different one because you're a dad now, so that's pretty special. Talk us through what it was like preparing for Tokyo with the postponement. Obviously, you weren't in Spain, back in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was different. Like we definitely had everything mapped out beforehand, as most people do. But we had our World Championships at the end of February in Berlin, which was meant to be Olympic year, the 2020, and that was sort of our last, I guess, our final big competition before the games. And the frustrating thing for us, I guess, is we were second there, but we felt like we were really building momentum as a squad, and so we were able to, carry that onto Tokyo. And so when everything did get postponed, it was sort of like, we're fully back to the drawing board now. And when you've got that long to train, you sort of have to restart everything from scratch. And I guess the other difficult thing was just knowing how you were going to prepare now, because we didn't know what was going to be in the way of competitions in the foreseeable future and everything like that, because cycling, we quite heavily rely on racing in the past to bring the form up for the Olympics. So, that was a new learning experience, but also a credit to the people who had involved that we made it work. So, it was a different build-up, but it still worked.
I guess you're so used to being in Europe, you do a lot of work in training in the States as well throughout your career. A bronze medal in London in the team pursuit, and then fourth in Rio. How much did that how much was that a catalyst for that real momentum building into Tokyo?
It was actually, in a weird way, it was actually the opposite of momentum for me, because after, we sort of went into Rio almost expecting a minimum of bronze because we'd done that before, and it felt like we were entitled in a way to more than that. But our build-up just was not great. We didn't, like in London, we had a really tight-knit team that we all, we were great mates off the bike, and we just had sort of a few personality clashes and stuff in the team leading into Rio, and we just the coaching we had wasn't quite aligned with, because that's the difficult thing with the team pursuit. You've got 4 very different athletes that are trying to do different jobs, but all come together on race day, and like people need different kinds of training to, like, for example, I'm the back end of the team pursuit, so I'm the more endurance side of the sport, and then you've got the guys that have to get us up to speed, which is wheel 1 and 2, which are a lot more punchy. And so you need to train together because it's a team event and you need to know all the technicalities and things, but at the same time everyone needs a slightly different stimulus to be physically peaking on race day. So it's a really difficult task for the coach to come up with how we're going to do that. And unfortunately, for Rio, for numerous reasons, we just didn't seem to get that quite right. And there was just so many, looking back on, there were so many things that just didn't go quite to plan. Like even we went to Europe expecting to be, training in good weather, and, that summertime and everything just sort of brings your morale up. And we were in Belgium for a month, and it literally rained at some point every single day, which is not uncommon for Belgium, but at the same time, it was just like a massive, it's just a massive dampener on spirits. And then, like, because the coach could sort of see we're all a bit cracked, he's like, oh, we'll go somewhere nice in France for a week of just like solid road training. And we go there and it just rained as well. It was just like, just seemed everything was against us. But, I mean, sounds like I'm whinging here, but I mean, it wasn't all that bad. We're a bunch of bike riders living in Europe together, but just numerous things didn't go quite right. And after that, I really needed to, I felt like I couldn't do another 4 years of full focus for the track, because that was sort of probably the other thing is, after London, the track was my main focus all the way through. And so I was lucky enough to be presented an opportunity to go and race for an Irish team in Europe after Rio. So I did the track worlds the following year, but I did all my own build-up in Mallorca. Kirsty was actually motor pacing me on a borrowed scooter on the velodrome there before I flew into Hong Kong for the worlds, and I was second in the Omnium there. And then that was sort of the last track race I did for quite some time. I was going to try and do the Commonwealth Games in 2018, just possibly the road race and also the points race on the track. But I broke my wrist in a race in February, and I was, must have been early Jan, because it was early Jan. And so I was sort of on the back foot with the team, and it was contract year, so I had to put my best foot forward with them. So I stayed in Europe and fly back to the Gold Coast for that. Which was kind of weird, like missing one of those games, because I'd done every single one through from Delhi. And but at the same time, I think it was really good for me just to have that mental refresher away from track cycling, and meant that I could come back a bit hungrier for Tokyo.
Well, you couldn't do the 4 years, but so they made it 5.
Yeah, true. So I skipped a year, and then I got it tacked on at the end.
So that's unfortunate. But hey, you got there in the end with it sounds like a really refreshed mindset as well, and leading into Tokyo with a different dynamic, a different coach in the team, preparing from home. I know you guys did a lot of training camps around New Zealand. What was the mood when you left New Zealand? You go to this empty Auckland airport now. You're so used to seeing, so many people. What was it like flying out off to Tokyo?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's funny looking back on that stuff. You kind of forget all those little tidbits. I guess when we've been living in this sort of isolated, quiet world for over a year, almost became normal, I suppose, because it's been so long since we've been to Auckland Airport. But it's definitely a bit of a different vibe. Mum and Dad still came and saw me off at the airport, as they like to do. But sitting at one of those I can't remember what it's called, that restaurant upstairs in the Auckland departure terminal, and we're just sitting down having a coffee, and half the restaurants are still fully closed, most of the shops are closed, and there's just like literally us and a handful of other people were sitting around, and like we're the only flight that's going out, maybe one of them to Aussie or something at the time, and it was just like, that was pretty bizarre. But I guess once we got to Tokyo and started going through all the processing and accreditation checks and everything, it sort of started to actually feel like we were at Olympics, because that stuff is inevitable, albeit a little bit more extreme this time with the PCR tests and whatnot that we had to do on arrival and waiting around. But it's all all part of the usual fun and games.
Yeah, it is. And it became the new normal for you because every day you did a saliva test. And that, the New Zealand team in itself, like you say, was coming from this very clean environment of, we hadn't really experienced what the rest of the world were living in, some horrific COVID cases, numbers, deaths. Were you apprehensive, or particularly as a dad, young boy, or did you feel really confident in the protocols that were in place?
No, I felt pretty confident in the protocols. I think the amount of testing was a bit of a, made it easy to put your mind at ease about any concerns that people might have had, because there was that much testing that you couldn't avoid that. If someone was going to be a positive case, then it'd be found out pretty quickly. And I guess the other thing for us too, it was a little bit different from a cycling perspective, because we were in like a satellite village outside of the main Olympic village. So in that way, it wasn't like a proper Olympics, because we weren't in the main village with the huge, vast dining hall. It actually felt like we were just at like a more normal World Championships or World Cup or something like that. So that vibe was a little bit different, and I guess maybe it helped everyone feel a bit more relaxed about the whole situation. But it was also a shame for the people that in our squad that hadn't been to the Olympics before. They didn't get to fully experience what the Olympics was in terms of the vast, over 10,000
Olympic circus.
Everyone all the Olympic circus. There's definitely still elements of it, but it made it easy to compete at our best. So that was kind of what we were there to do.
Hi, Axel. Hey, and so you get. Oh, don't watch your fingers in the door, bud. So you get onto the track, and cool. Hola. Oh, hi, Axel. I'm Sarah. What do you think of Daddy racing, doing his race around the velodrome?
You found your muesli bar.
Oh, good.
Gonna go and see Mummy. You show your muesli bar?
Oh, can I see it? What flavour is it? Oh, looks good.
Muesli bar.
You ate it.
Dates and cocoa. Yum.
Dates and cocoa. Nice.
Gonna go and see Mummy.
No, that's fine. Hey, so Gatey, you get into the first round, the team pursuit. You're feeling good. Rumour has it you guys the track is fast. You're producing some really good times in training, and you ride your qualifying ride. How did that feel to go so fast in qualifying?
It was pretty surreal. Like we get the lap times from the coach every lap, and you sort of like you're used to hearing particular numbers in your head in training and stuff, and then when you go to race day and they're just all that much faster, you're just like, oh, surely this pace is going to come off at some point. We can't sustain this. And then, generally, you start a team pursuit, your first lap is getting up to speed, and then your second lap sets the tone for the rest of the ride. And you can, like as we say, you're not going to win a team pursuit in the second lap, but you can lose it, because if you go too fast and you overcook it, then it's just it could be all down from there. And
it's a really long race.
The second lap time and the third lap time was sort of like, oh, we might have cooked this one, guys. But we held on and we had a really good ride. I think it was one of our best executed ever team pursuits, so we were pretty happy with it. It was our fastest ever qualifying time, and I think the time's done there with the fastest qualifying times ever in the world. So that was cool, and it gave us a lot of confidence going into the next round. I don't know if we did break the world record, and we were close. Maybe not. I don't think we broke the world record in qualifying, because the difference is you've got only one team on the track, so you get a little bit of slipstream when you got two teams. But then we went into the following day against that was the other thing. We didn't want to where you finish in the first round is who you ride in the final. Where you finish in the qualifying is who you ride in the first round. And, sorry, one moment.
You're right. I did get it wrong. Sorry. It was the second round, which you're just about to tell me. You faced Italy.
Yeah.
And they came out steaming.
They did, yeah.
342.307. And you guys rode 342.397. So, a tenth separating you. Less than a tenth.
Yeah.
And they rode a world record. And you've ridden a world record too, essentially. But they've ridden faster by less than a tenth in the same race.
Yeah.
So was there a tactic in the first round to not have to ride against Italy, one of the other big nations?
Well, I mean, you have to do your best ever ride, like put your best ever performance on the track in any round to make it through. Because the other thing is, if you only ride, say, if you're fifth or lower in the first round, you don't even get a chance to try and ride for gold because you have to be in the top four in the qualifying. And so the team we probably didn't want to face in the first round was Denmark. They were the favourites. They were the current world champions and world record holders. But Italy were a little bit more unknown. Like, we knew they were going to be good, but we just weren't sure how good. And sure enough, it was sort of like their team anchor, Filippo Ganna, who's world individual pursuit champion and world time trial champion on the road. So he's absolutely phenomenal athlete, and he was just the guy who pegged us back that tiny bit in the final lap because he's just basically a machine. So yeah, that was like super gutting because it felt like we'd done everything right, and it was one time that it actually felt like we'd gone to the Olympics, and in the 3 Olympics I've done, that we genuinely, I anyway felt like we were genuinely a gold medal contender, and so to miss out by the narrowest of margins like that was gutting. And of course, you start running through your head, what if we did this slightly differently and that? But it's not something you can do. It's what's happened has happened, and we sort of had to refocus on beating the Australians for bronze. But for me, mentally, we kind of already lost. I don't mean to sound ungrateful or anything here, but having already got a bronze medal, I was there for something more, and I felt like our team really deserved it because we did. Not saying that other countries didn't, but I just felt like we really put in the hard yards while we were trapped back in New Zealand. So that was it was pretty gutting, that first round for sure.
All right, because there was so much drama as well. Every night, there was the handlebar collapse of the Australian.
Yeah.
And then the next night, there was another crash.
The Danes crashed into the back of the British team.
Honestly,
it was.
I was watching this with Scotty Stevenson on the TVNZ coverage, and I think my heart rate was like I was doing chemistry myself. What was it like, the mood in the velodrome? Because it was just seemed like, this really high risk, high reward energy of people were just smashing themselves to try and get
well,
final rise, like you say.
And that's the thing, like there can literally be years of team pursuit competitions without a single crash. Like, they're pretty rare. And then we had those two, plus obviously my one the following day in the final. And it was pretty bizarre in that sense, I guess. It made it exciting for the people watching, is probably one thing, but not something that you want to happen when you're a rider. Like, you don't like seeing other people crash either. But I guess it's just the nature of how it's going now. Like, we're going so much faster than we were a couple of years ago. Like, 1 or 2K an hour faster is enough to really change the way the bike handles and everything else. And because you're just trying to do absolutely everything you can to be as aerodynamic as possible, while still pedaling as hard as you can. It can make what seems simple, riding a bike, actually be quite challenging.
The effort for the marginal gain, like the marginal gain is hours and hours work into that moment. Before we talk about the final ride, which was the ride for bronze, even though in our hearts, I think that Italy, essentially your semi-final ride, or that second ride, felt like a final. You've kind of touched on it, but talk us through how were you guys going so much faster? Because your previous sort of times that you were leading into this were 5 seconds, slower than what you were producing at the Olympics. Was it the 18 months extra preparation? Was it technology? Was it the coaching? Was it the guys? Or was it just this perfect storm of all those factors combined plus a really fast track?
Yeah, it was, you kind of summed it up there. It was just a combination of everything. I think when the games were postponed, like I'd said earlier, it sort of took away our momentum, but at the same time, because we were able to actually have this period of time that we haven't had before to really just knuckle down and do kinds of training that previously we don't really get a chance to do, because you've always got another competition in a month or two, so you never really want to be in a massive form hole. But we sort of got a chance to do that and do a lot more strength work in the gym and basically smash our legs into oblivion with some strength efforts on the bike and work in the gym that we previously probably hadn't been able to hit as hard. And it sort of laid that really strong foundation that we could keep building on right through until we got to the games. And then, we had made some good advancements in the technology with our skin suits. Our wheels from Southern Spars, the New Zealand mask manufacturing company, were lighter than ever before. And just a lot of work that we got time to do a lot of work on our positions as well, because we did, countless laps on the velodrome in Cambridge in that build-up. And every single effort we do, we can see all the data in terms of our drag coefficient, because it's only been in more recent times that we worked out just how important that drag coefficient number is. It used to always be about just power and speed, but we kind of forgot about that drag coefficient being what the main determining factor between generating speed from that power is. And so just being able to really dial that in has been what's made us go so much faster in recent years. And also the fact that the Tokyo track was just blazingly fast too. Like, it was sort of the sweet spot of being at a little bit of altitude. I think we were 400 or 500 meters above sea level, and just to bore you with the details, it makes the air density quite a bit lower. So we had the really high humidity, high temperature, and a little bit of altitude. So they were like the three big factors which determine air density. So lower air density, you don't have to pedal as hard to go as fast, basically. And the track shape itself was really nice. It was just like a perfect storm of just being such a nice track to race on. Albeit it would have been a little bit nicer with crowds yelling. They had some people in there at least, but they were told they weren't allowed to cheer because of the risk of COVID being spread by yelling. So we had some Japanese people with their little clappers. Which is good to at least have some spectators.
So awesome. Yeah. Because you were being in that satellite village, you did have that luxury of, even though, some noise, some crowd noise.
Yeah.
Just one point, Gatey, can you explain to a non-cyclist, even though I do have some insights, what the drag coefficient is, because it's quite important.
Yeah, so it's CDA, we call it, and it's basically how much wind you're pushing through. So if you reduce that by basically reducing your frontal surface area and the way that you move through the air, it essentially means you don't have to do as much power to go as fast. So the likes of, an aeroplane or whatever that are reliant on drag coefficient in the shape of the aerofoil wing is basically something we're trying to mimic in our bike position. So previously we would have, that's why we have the aero bars like that, because it's to lower the drag coefficient. But in the past, we would have been quite upright. And I guess that's why we're starting to see these crashes again in team pursuing now, because we've gone from having positions that were all about having vision, but still being able to put the power out, to realising that, okay, we need to go fast now, guys. So now we're essentially trying to go nearly 70k an hour, and what you're seeing now is basically my vision at that speed. Like I'm looking between my wrists.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! So do you think that's why because that Danish Australian race, or where
the Danish British race,
Danish British race,
100%. He was going a lot faster than the British rider. The British rider had been dropped by his team, so he would have come up and at a great rate of speed. But at the same time, he was actually just not looking. He was just looking down, and sometimes you do look down because you're just focusing on giving it absolutely everything you've got. But you still need to be able to look where you're going.
Far out. Okay, well, hey, let's go now into that final ride, and you are riding for bronze. You know that you were capable of that. That pursuit of that perfect performance, which you were so on in that the ride before against Italy, but you are now riding against Australia, and it's looking like you're in a position where you can win the bronze medal, and then disaster strikes. What happened for those that were not watching on that night, and what was going through your mind afterwards?
Yeah, well, it definitely wasn't complacency that we had going into there. We were confident because we were a good couple of seconds up on Australia, so we felt like we had a little bit of a buffer there. But at the same time, we knew fair well you can never discount the Aussies. They can always pull something special out when they have to. And they were they had previously gone through to the gold ride, only to be beaten by GB in the previous two Olympics. So they've got a lot of pedigree as a track cycling nation. But yeah, we were pretty even. I think, I've watched the video back, and it was anyone's race kind of thing through the first half of the race, and I'd finished my first turn, which was about halfway through the race, and I'd lapped off and got back on the back of the team, and it was just sort of this trifecta of things that all went wrong at the at the exact moment. Just one of those things where, because it was an Olympic final, you should never change anything. That, people often say, before you go to the Olympics, best piece of advice: don't change anything that you would normally do at any other competition. Just because it's the Olympics, you don't have to try and do something weird or crazy or whatever. And often in an individual pursuit, you might just have a quick look across the track to see where the other rider is when you're going down the straight, because you can often just catch, and if you just, in the peripheral vision, you get a feel of where we're at. And so I sort of did that when I was on the back of the team pursuit. And at the same moment I did that, we were when we were riding the track, another boring technical detail, but on the bottom of the track, you've got the red and the black line. And so to help make the track more even, we ride the red line in the straights, and we chop down to the black line in the corners. So it doesn't really add any distance to what we do, but it helps keep us more even as a team. So you get sort of the whiplash coming in and out of the corners with the G-force. So you ride the straights a little bit higher. It means we can keep more even distance and ride in a more controlled way. Because a big part of the team pursuit is looking after the guys that are behind you, because they've got to come through and do another turn. So I sort of did this glance across to see where the Aussies were at as we were coming into the corner, and I sort of just got caught out by when Curb's in front of me. I mean, it's not his fault. We'll do it. We go from the red to the black. But my front wheel was just a tiny bit under his wheel as he came down, and we don't have brakes on our bike, so you need time to react.
Speaking of bikes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, you need a bit of time to react, and I didn't have that, and it was just just that moment where his back wheel overlapped my front wheel underlapped his back wheel. Gonna go and see Mummy.
Yeah, Mummy.
Here you go.
What have you got now?
Is that the same? It's the same muesli bar, still going.
Oh, good boy. Still going. Good boy. And so you hit the track, Gatey.
Yeah.
And is it a moment where it's like you can't remember it, or you just can still remember that feeling of?
I can remember. I can remember sliding on the track. I can remember hitting the boards and sliding on the track, and just sort of being like, "How has this happened? This can't be." You just want to sort of go back in time a few seconds because literally it can be avoided so easily. And it's just one of those things that once it's happened, though, like it's all over. Like that's the sort of high stakes nature of the Olympics. That one tiny little costly error. And there's no second chances. So it was, absolutely gutting. Like, I was gutted, but I was more gutted for my teammates as well because we'd all put in so much work together. And I just felt like I'd let the whole squad down, staff as well. Like it was just, plus we had so many people, watching back home, and just felt like that medal would have been ours, and it was not because of such a simple error, especially because we've done I've done so many team pursuits, so many laps, and this has never happened to me before. And then you get to such a crucial moment of a race, and it didn't happen. I mean, the only thing is that I took out of it is I just felt like I'd said earlier, we kind of had already lost when the Italians beat us in that first round, and if it was a ride for gold, I think it would have almost been so much harder to digest, even if we had walked away with a silver medal. Because I just was so hungry for that gold medal that I felt like we'd finally got close to, and that was the motivation to keep training the whole time. Once I got back into the program and all through lockdown and everything, but shit happens, and just kind of it was. The other thing too is I was meant to ride the Omnium and the medicine the following 2 days, and as soon as I stood up, I was sitting there on the floor, just like the head in my hands, like what had just happened after I crashed. And I went to stand up, and I put my right hand down to stand up, and I just felt my collarbone just move, and I was like, no. So I had to grab a hand, get pulled up. And I vividly remember going to Campbell and saying, "Oh mate, make sure you warm down." Like I was gutted, and I was just saying sorry to the guys. I was like, make sure you warm down properly because you're riding the Omnium tomorrow. He's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, my collarbone's broken. I can't ride." He's like, "Are you sure it's broken?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure." But like,
and for anyone that did not see the crash or the the images afterwards, it was pretty significant, and that you'd done, it was a very strong indication that you had broken something at that point.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a surprise as well, because I've crashed on, like, not in pursuing, but I've crashed in other races on the track numerous times, and normally splinters and a bit of burn, skin burn from sliding on the wood is the worst you get. But it was just, so I was kind of surprised that I had broken my collarbone, because I was like, how has this happened? And then you sort of think about it, and we were going 68 k an hour or something, I think, at that moment. And then so I basically hit the wheel and gone, and because it was into the banking, I fell that way into the banking. It was basically like just going at 60 something k an hour straight into a wall and landing directly on my outside of my shoulder. So in hindsight, I can see how it broke, but at the time I was just like thinking how.
Yeah. Well, like you say, shit does happen, and that's the nature of high performance sport. Sometimes you're on the right side of the ledger, and sometimes you're on the other side of the ledger, which no one wanted to see. And I'm sure your wife and who was watching back in New Zealand, and your parents were just straight away concerned for your well-being and your well-being, the team's well-being as well. But what struck me, Gatey, was that the next night we did see Campbell Stewart line up in the Madison, and he had an absolute blinder going on to win the silver medal. but we saw you on the fence line, cheering your mate on. What was that like for you to see him?
It was like redemption in a way. I think for our whole squad, seeing Campbell ride that well, like we knew he was capable of it, and even going into the games, the coaching staff had to leave the decision who was riding the Omnium so late because it literally could have been either of us or even Corbin that rode that race and still performed. So, yeah, we were all quietly confident that Campbell was going to pull a good one out, but to see him actually do it was pretty bloody awesome. And probably, definitely the highlights of the...
Omnium.
No, it's all good.
Apologies.
Medicine was the following day. But yeah, no, it was that was definitely the highlight of the game, just seeing Campbell absolutely nail that points race at the end of the Omnium.
Yeah, and another highlight was your message to him. Fuck yeah, like... Apologies for the language, but it was pretty clear what you were saying, and it was just, a moment of this was his medal, but it was so much more than that for your men's endurance team in particular.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like my wife will happily tell you that I'm not a particularly emotional person, but even just thinking back to it now has rekindled some of that emotion I did have at that moment, and it was just pretty hard to contain at that very moment in time.
That's great to see, Gatey. And so your wing is broken, you're in a sling, and you leave Tokyo and you go to Europe to get your collarbone sorted. Talk us through what happened after that.
Well, it kind of probably goes back to the night before, where I ended up going in an ambulance to a hospital. And I mean, it all feels kind of stupid at the time, because you walk out of the track to go and see the medical staff, and then they say, "I'll get in the ambulance, but you have to lie down and put me in this." I already had a sling on, but it was just like, a little bit over the top. But anyway, we got to the hospital, had the x-rays done, confirmed the break, and that it was quite I can't remember the exact terminology, but the fracture was quite dislodged. So it wasn't just like that, it was that. So surgery was definitely the better option, just to make sure it healed correctly, but also it would mean that I could get back to competing sooner. And the option never really, like the hospital we were at and the outskirts of Tokyo, never really was an option to get the surgery there. It would have been a transfer to somewhere else. And we had a translator with us, but the language barrier is a little bit difficult. So when I got picked up by our coaches and one of the vehicles and taken back to the village, I just called a contact I knew in Belgium, who was fairly high up at the Ghent University Hospital, and he was awesome. He put me in touch with their head sort of shoulder expert surgeon, and it's not the first collarbone surgery that's been done there. Collarbones are quite a common cycling injury, and Belgium's sort of the cycling mecca of the world. So this guy had done a few plates, and they basically managed to squeeze me in for surgery the following week. So it would have been a lot more complicated if I'd gone home. Like, we talked with the NZOC staff about how that would look, and it would still be going to MIQ, applying for an exemption to be able to get out of the MIQ hotel to go and get the surgery done, which would be all very strict protocols. And then as soon as the surgery would be done, just be straight back into the MIQ hotel again. And that just seemed like not a fantastic idea at the time. So I was quite lucky to have those contacts and be able to make it all work. And
there has been some complications, though, I have seen on your Instagram account.
Yeah,
it didn't quite work out as straightforward as you would have liked, as Kirsty would have liked, and I'm sure Axel would have liked Dad to be, had his wing fixed and fixed for good. What's happened since?
Well, it was, again, a combination of things that went a little bit wrong, where I had the surgery done, and the benefit of having a collarbone plated is that the strength it's not as strong having a completely healed bone, but there's a titanium plate that's screwed along your bone, so you can basically go back to doing what you want to do within reason. Like, they still say you should allow the bone to calcify a bit before you're taking any knocks or do anything too crazy. The surgeon, the Belgian surgeon's exact words were, "Yeah, you can move your arm and do what you want to do, but I wouldn't go riding a motorcycle down a set of stairs." so I jumped back on the home trainer the following day, because the other thing was just like the balance, and because I hadn't had my arm in a sling for, by the time I had the long haul flight, like I changed my flight, but it was still 2 or 3 days in Tokyo before I could get out of there, and then got to Belgium on the Friday, so the surgery was booked for Monday, so I still had like a few days there where my arm was just fully immobilised, and you have the surgery done where they had to cut through muscle and whatever else. So the muscles and everything were actually more sore than the bone itself, because plus it sort of goes to, your shoulder goes to sleep. So it took a couple of days on the home trainer, just getting back used to it. But then the side effect of that was just how sweaty you get, especially because it was summer and I was in Belgium for a few days before coming back here. And I think just the sheer amount of sweat and trying to keep the stitches wound dry ended up becoming infected, and just, I think, the nature of the stitches too, the surgeon had used. I remember him telling me it was like after the fact, it wasn't an option beforehand, but he sort of used semi-internal dissolvable stitches because it helps cosmetically. And I was like, well, I've got this big bloody gash down, which I don't really care about. I'm not a beach volleyball player.
Yeah.
And
wrong guy.
Yeah. So the stitches just had, like, basically at the end of the cut.
Oh yeah.
They had to be removed after 2 weeks. So but I think what had happened was the stitches down the middle had possibly become infected. And it was once they actually did the test, once I had the second operation to remove that infection, it was just a common skin-based bacteria. It wasn't something that had got in there during the operation. It's something that had just penetrated my skin. Just a bacteria that's on your skin, but it's not meant to go inside your skin. So that was quite frustrating to have to go through all that. But it was another operation on general anaesthetic and cut open again and properly cleaned out, and antibiotics for 10 days. But at least I was sort of back racing again soon after. But it was always a risk. The surgeon said that there might be some residual infection, because the problem was they can't know for sure that the bacteria doesn't get onto the metal plate itself, and then as much as they clean it, the antibiotics and the blood flow your body can't fight, because it's a foreign material, like infection in the bone or whatever. Your body has some control over it. The metal plate, there's no sort of a disconnect.
Land.
Yeah. And then a few weeks after that second op, when everything looked fully healed, stitches were out, I was like, sweet. And just had this like small bubble, and I was just like, it's just like irritation from where the stitches were of because we have our cycling shorts have straps that go over your shoulder, and it was directly over where the wound was. So I thought it was just a bit of friction irritation. And just like a small blister, but this blister just kept slowly becoming bigger and bigger. And I was like, okay, I better manage this a bit more. So I started putting tape on it to take the friction away, thinking it was something that was just going to, it was really soft. It just felt like like white blood cells you get under a blister on your toe or whatever. And then it just got to a point that it was that big, it was getting uncomfortable, and it burst. And I was like, this doesn't look great. Went and saw a doctor. I was actually at another track race in Denmark, saw a doctor there, and he was like, that's granulated tissue that might never heal, because it's either your body is not tolerating the plate or it's residual infection in the site. And I was like, this is not what I wanted to hear. So when I got back to Girona, I went to the doctor here at the hospital nearby, and they were like, could be in the plate, needs to come out. And I was like, you're joking me. So tried to get some more scans, and it was just like a bit of a nightmare just trying to get things booked here, because there was, I don't know if it's this time of year or what, but trying to get a CT scan was going to take 2 weeks. And so the longer this sort of weird growth is sitting on my shoulder, kind of want to get rid of this as soon as possible. So I contacted the surgeon in Belgium, but because sort of COVID's ramping back up there again, they can only take emergency bookings. He said, I could book you in and you come all the way here and then we have to snub you, so I can't. I'd really like to help, but I can't confirm that I actually can because of the restrictions in the hospital. But I have a contact in Madrid, so like these guys go to, I don't know, some really exciting shoulder bone expert conferences somewhere, I don't know, but they were mates apparently, and he contacted this guy in Madrid, who was bloody awesome. He got back to me straight away, and that same week I was on the train to Madrid and managed to get the operation done. And this guy was super thorough, and was really confident in what he was doing. And he said, I've got two options, or three options. He either goes in and tries to clean the plate out, sew it back up, but that's a bit of a risk that, if infection's just going to come back again. So he said, I recommend one of two options, which is we take the plate out, but your bone, normally we leave the plate for a year, not 4, it's only been 4 months. So your bone's not going to be as strong as it should be, especially because you've got basically the holes where the screws have been put in. That was what kind of shocked me, actually, was when I saw the metal plate in the original surgeon's room after I went back for a consultation. I was like, is that what's in there? And he's like, yeah. And it's just like, literally just looks like wood chip screws made of titanium, not just cheap metal. But it's just kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's kind of like screws you could get at Mitre 10A, like, because I've
exactly.
Some of my feet, and I had one out because there was complications, and I was like, what the heck?
It's bizarre, eh?
Did you guys buy these at Bunnings? Like, seriously?
Yeah. The only telltale is they've got the fancy like Torx heads that you get on things you're not meant to play with. Did you have to have a plate in your foot? Was that a stress fracture or something?
Yes, both. So both my naviculars, which is the little bone in your foot, have been screwed.
Wow,
but my left foot didn't work, so that came out. But still got the right one in. So it's all doesn't need to just stand there. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, but through this time, Gatey, after the Olympics, through your shoulder surgery and subsequent surgeries after that, you also were competing in the World Champs, medalled, and have gone on to the UCI Track Champions League as well, which sounds like a really cool brand new competition within the UCI track fraternity, I guess. Is it hard to look back on these last 6 months and do you think, wow, it's like a bit of a crazy blur, or is this, are you comfortable with this pace of everything that's happened?
I guess I am comfortable with it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I like a bit of, keeps life interesting, but as sort of dawned on me when it was coming around to finding this operation sorted once the Track Champions League had finished. And I guess the difficult thing is knowing when to stop your season, because that's the thing with being a road and a track cyclist. It's quite easy when, like, the last road race of the year is the 15th of October, and that's when the calendar finishes. So everyone, it's the off-season, everyone puts their feet up, and that's when the track season's kind of just getting started. So it's difficult to know when to stop. And I sort of, another race that I did a month or so ago was a 3-day track race in Denmark, where the organiser called me literally the day before and was like, I don't suppose you're available. We've had someone pull out who's sick. Can you get on a plane to Denmark tomorrow? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So shot up there, and, these sort of races are a bit different to the World Champs or the World Cups, because that's where the money is in track cycling. You get paid to go to these races. So, like these sort of races, you're paid to show up, whereas the Track Champions League you're racing for prize money. So a little bit different in that regard, but it's sort of same in the sense that this is how track cyclists make a living. And so when I was there, the sponsor of everyone gets sponsored basically a jersey, and they were like, we'd love to have you back. We'd love seeing you race in our jersey. Because I think the previous period they had the last 3 years, the last previous years, they had the team that just got last in every race, and I was racing with a local Danish kid who was super motivated. So we ended up second overall. So they were happy to see their jersey on the podium, and says, "Oh yeah, it could be keen to come back." And it was the 28th and the 29th of December, and we'd sort of, Kirsty's got relatives in Denmark, so it could be nice to go there for Christmas and stuff. And then once this sort of realised I needed surgery, though, I was like, actually, no, I have to say no and actually put the feet up and prioritise a bit of rest and recovery and family time and stuff, because it's just so easy to keep saying yes to more races because it's fun and it's what we enjoy doing as bike riders is racing. But at some point you have to actually say no and focus on, some bigger goals in the future, because these sort of track racing have been, this following track season has been great for sort of getting back into the swing of racing and the tactics and everything that you need to be a good track cyclist. But yeah, I sort of also need to refocus on next road season, and that involves just actually having 3 weeks away from the bike now and rebuilding from the ground up for next season, and sort of refocus big picture towards the next Olympics now as well.
It's all on. Well, I'm glad to hear that the next Olympics is on the cards, Gatey, and there's lots to cover from right now till then, but how lovely that you can do it as a young family as well in Europe. Yeah,
it's awesome. We sort of, it's not without its challenges, but at the same time, Kirsty and I are both on the same page that it's not something you're going to get to do forever, so it's about making the most of being able to live somewhere different while we can. And it's a cool, although it's difficult being away from family, especially at Christmas time. We've got a great group of friends over here too, which definitely helps, and a lot of buggered back home to New Zealand at the moment, but there's still a few people kicking around, which has been good to catch up with some old friends that we hadn't seen for a while after being back in New Zealand for a long stint.
Awesome. Hey, Gatey, I'm conscious of time, and probably Axel's ready for his dad to take him maybe outside. I don't know. Hopefully he's finished the Tuesday bus.
School time.
School time. Oh, great. Yeah. Hey, but I'm just going to finish with which we have done with all the Cultivate Group athletes is a Fast 5 from Tokyo. So, quick fire. What was your best souvenir from Tokyo?
Best souvenir? Well, this hoodie's pretty comfortable.
Actually, it's so fun. It's been a bit awkward. Okay.
Oh, well, I think I've already covered one of them, which was seeing Campbell win that silver medal. I think the other one that stands out too was Elise Andrews' one, because I think just being in the velodrome for those experiences, you can see why people, like, it's not very often we get to sit in the grandstand, and actually being witness to what live sport is all about was made it all that more special. What else have we got? Souvenirs.
No, that's fine. That's great. You've kind of got your medal plate as well.
Yeah, well, it's taken out now and it's sitting in a lab, and I wanted to keep it, but it's sitting in a lab in Madrid getting the bacteria analysed, because apparently one's super slow. I've got basically this strong course of antibiotics for the next 2 months, but they're still trying to analyse. There's another type of bacteria that's really slow growing, so they need to make sure the antibiotics they're giving me are strong enough. It's probably a good thing we did the interview today, actually, because they told me one side effect would be that my eyeballs might turn orange. I was like, oh, great, thanks, guys. Favourite meal. See, that was actually the biggest letdown. The food wasn't bad, but the biggest letdown in the satellite village for cycling was the food, because those of us that have been to previous games, like, you've just got sport for choice. You can have anything you want, but we were just basically chicken and rice. And so the highlight was probably actually the teriyaki sauce, or the what was the other marinades? I can't remember what the other one was now, but Reg and I had a routine. It was just like chicken and rice, and we just alternate between these two, basically MSG sauces to add flavour. Yeah.
Okay. Favourite roommate in Tokyo?
I was with Nick Ferguson, actually. He was a bloody good roommate. We sort of had a few routines down packed. He was, I'd make him a coffee each morning, which I think he was quite thankful for.
Right.
Or maybe I was the best roommate.
Right, cool, right, cool. Okay. Now, this question, I've obviously asked the athletes, they've come back to New Zealand, and you were the only one that's actually gone on to Europe out of the Cultivate Sport athletes. So, best meal on return outside of Japan?
Oh, the first memorable one actually was probably just having a Belgian beer again. That was tasted pretty good.
Yeah. As they
Not
do.
good for bone healing, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah. And last
do.
question. Last question, Gatey. And again, this is like for our Aotearoa-based athletes at the moment. What's your plans for summer? So I'm going to ask, what's the plans for winter?
We're actually going to head up to Andorra for Christmas, which would be cool. So the silver lining of being stuck over here is have a white Christmas, which is something we might never get another chance to do. So we're going to take Axel up to the snow, and not sure I'll be on the skis like I really want to be with this fragile collarbone, but we'll get Axel onto the dog and see how it goes.
Avoid the skis, Gatey. Don't be tempted. Hey, that sounds awesome. You've had such an illustrious career, Gatey, and what was always impressed me about you is that you're just a great human as well, and I think that we really saw that in Tokyo, this fierce competitor, but also a person with such mana in cycling. So, congratulations. I know it wasn't what you wanted, but like you say, things happen, and I'm sure that the lessons from that experience will be burning as you guys head in your preparation for Paris.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's probably one thing to close on, was that disappointment. At least it just instantly sparked that desire to do another Olympics and do it right next time. So hopefully you can watch us continue as a team pursuit towards Paris.
Brilliant. Well, I'm looking forward to that already, Gatey. And you have a great Christmas with Kirsty and Axel, and don't do any skiing. Stay safe. Thanks, Gatey.
Appreciate it. Have a good Christmas too. Cheers.